Pauline Hanson is, without a doubt, one of Australia's most talked about politicians, and in a recent, really in-depth interview, she laid all her cards on the table. So what we're going to do here is break down that conversation to explain her core arguments on everything from free speech to the future of Australia using her own words. And she started with a bang. I mean, just look at this quote. It really sets the stage, doesn't it? It captures her incredibly intense opposition to new laws in Australia, which she sees as a direct threat, not just to her career, but to what she considers the basic right of free speech for everyone. All right, so the first thing you need to know is that Hanson builds her entire political identity around this one idea, being a politician of conviction. She feels totally vindicated right now, arguing that public opinion polls are finally starting to line up with the views she's been shouting from the rooftops for decades. So what does that actually mean to her? Well, in her view, it's about being a totally unwavering voice for the people. It means being upfront, saying what you really believe, and refusing to vote for laws you think are bad for the country. And of course, it means you don't flip-flop all over the place, which is a criticism she loves to aim at her political rivals.
Okay, so that brings us to the first big issue, her massive standoff against new hate speech laws. The way she frames it, this is a fundamental fight between a citizen's right to have an opinion and what she would call massive government overreach. Now, this is where she draws a really important line, at least in her view. She says she absolutely supports laws that stop people from inciting violence, but she argues those laws are already on the books. What she's dead set against are these new, broader hate speech rules. She's convinced they'll just be used to shut down any real debate on tough subjects like immigration.
And really, this quote pretty much sums up her whole argument. For her, this isn't about defending hate. It's about protecting what she sees as a core principle, that every single person has the right to say what they think, no matter how much you might disagree with it. One of her key legal complaints is that the law could be applied retroactively, and her analogy for this is super simple. She says it's like driving at 50 kilometers an hour, which is the legal limit, and then a month later getting a ticket because the government changed the speed limit to 40 and decided to fine you for something that was perfectly legal when you did it.
And it wasn't just what was in the law that she had a problem with, it was how it got passed. She claims that thousands of public comments on the first version of the bill were just tossed aside. A totally new bill was then dropped on their desks at 10 in the morning, and they were forced to vote on it that very afternoon. Not enough time, she says, for anyone to properly read it, let alone debate it.
And that whole idea of silencing debate, well, that leads us right into our second major theme, and it's a big one. Her long-standing, very critical take on Australia's immigration policy and the whole idea of multiculturalism itself. When it comes to multiculturalism, she does not mince words. The interviewer asked her flat out if it's a flawed concept. Her answer? Absolutely, and she's been saying so since day one of her political career. So how does she back this up? Well, she paints a picture of two completely different waves of migration. On one side, you have what she calls the first wave, post-war migrants who, in her telling, worked their tails off, learned the language, and blended into Australian life. On the other side is the recent wave, who she claims don't want to assimilate, exploit the system, and even have, in her exact words, a hatred for our culture. You can imagine where this is going. This all led the interviewer to ask a really pointed, direct question that cuts right to the heart of it. Should Australia's migration policy be, by its very definition, discriminatory? And her answer was just as direct. I'm all for it. No hesitation. She says she has no problem with it at all and has even named countries she believes Australia should stop taking migrants from, at least without much stricter vetting. This brings us to one of her most infamous political moments, wearing a burqa in Parliament. She explained that this wasn't just some random stunt. She'd put forward a bill to ban the burqa, but it wasn't even given a hearing. So, to force the issue, she wore one into the chamber, essentially daring her opponents to react, and then calling them hypocrites for being offended by her wearing it, while also refusing to debate banning it. So, with all that said, what's the end game here? Where's this all heading? The final part of the interview dug into her political ambitions, not just for herself, but for her party, One Nation, and where she sees it fitting into Australia's future. So, the million-dollar question was finally put to her. Is the ultimate goal to become the Prime Minister of Australia? Her answer might actually surprise you. It was a flat no. She says she's a realist. She pointed to her age and the massive political mountain she'd have to climb as practical reasons why that's just not in the cards. And this is where her real ambition becomes clear. It isn't about personal power. The goal for her party, One Nation, is to become a major force in Parliament.
The dream scenario, holding the balance of power, where they get the final say on legislation. Or, even more ambitiously, becoming the official opposition. Either way, the goal is to be the voice for what she calls the grassroots Australians who feel left behind.
And that really brings us full circle. As we've heard, in her own words, Pauline Hanson defines herself by her convictions. So the bigger question this whole thing leaves us with is one that applies to politics everywhere. Where exactly is the line between being a politician of conviction and just stirring up controversy for the sake of it?